Welcome to Entrepreneurs, Executives, and Eccentrics, a podcast dedicated to the stories, strategies, and secrets of remarkable individuals. Join us as we engage in enlightening conversations with intriguing entrepreneurs, accomplished executives, and fascinating eccentrics, exploring their journeys, triumphs, and the unconventional wisdom that has shaped their success. In this episode, we talk with Nicholas Allen, a performance marketer who helps law firms grow through personal injury lead generation. We discuss his shift from architecture to digital marketing, the value of focusing on one niche, and the lessons he learned from scaling too fast. We also explore how AI is changing marketing and where human judgment still matters most.
Hello, Nick. Tell me who or what you do.
Hi, Scott. So I'm Nick. I'm from South Africa, Cape Town in South Africa. I am a performance marketer and I own a performance marketing or lead generation agency that focuses on legal lead generation in the US.
So it's we were talking earlier, and it's really interesting because you think about how you're like, okay, lead marketing, great. Lead gen, great. You're like, no, that's not much of a niche. Okay, niche down. I don't know, legal. Okay, great, niche. No. Personal injury, niche. You keep going down. You know,
Niche.
I mean, I guess it's obvious to the listeners why, because there's clearly people willing to pay for that. But how did you get here?
Well, Scott, that is a very interesting and tricky question. I think the honest answer is I actually have no idea. It happened by chance, but mainly just, trying to go from, I guess, the typical route that most people wanting to do. I studied architecture, worked as an architect, didn't like it, realized I wanted to work online, followed many different paths on how to get there, work online, starting with the drop shipping, starting on the blogging, went down a very, very deep rabbit hole, ended up doing some very basic course on basically like local lead gen, generating leads for, say, yoga studios or beauty salons. And that was pretty much, like how I started in the digital space. Then realized that the bottleneck there was that it was quite difficult to scale, quite difficult to get to a place where, I could grow it because one, it wasn't niched enough that I would have, beauty salon, yoga studio, that. And I found myself like overworking and, being underpaid because each client was very different. I need approval from there. I need approval from there. And I landed up hating it. And then I basically went out and said like, hey, what if I went after bigger clients? And then I started looking and doing research on like, how would I go and generate for like life insurance? And then I basically reverse engineered like ads online around, life insurance ads and like debt relief ads here in South Africa. And then I started seeing that there was just a different way of doing it, going a little bit deeper. And then it all went around like a qualification survey. So then I was like, okay, this is kind of interesting because instead of, going after the small fries, that can't pay very much, I can go after big clients and then realize that I can do have one brand that ultimately I own. I've got 3 brands now and I own those brands, do ads for that, and then basically funnel all that traffic into multiple places. So instead of going, one campaign for one little yoga studio, I now go one big campaign for multiple clients. And that's basically the crux of it. But, how I got there was just by chance. I started doing like insurance, and then I started doing like debt relief ads. And it's all falls within like the pay-per lead space, where you sell a lead rather than selling a retainer, which is actually, in my opinion, is a much easier way to work. Because the clients, I'm not going to, hey, Scott, let me get leads for you or pay me $2,000 a month. I'm going to try and get your leads. I'm going to go, hey, Scott, give me $2,000 and I'm going to give you 20 leads. And, that is a much easier business model. And, so once I kind of grasped the concept of that was like, made a lot of sense to me. It was scalable. I didn't have to go back and forth to the clients and say, hey, can I get approval of this and get approval of that, which I hated. And then all of a sudden I've had 2 or 3 years experience in performance marketing or paper lead generation. And I dabbled in niches like, insurance, loans, financial services, debt relief, life insurance, funeral insurance, final expense, all of that. And then eventually, just randomly off a Facebook group, someone says, "Hey, can you generate leads in personal injury?" And I said, "Sure, I haven't, but sure, kind of give me this, and this," and off to the races. And next minute, within 6 to 9 months, I'd done $1 million with that client. And because it was very, very scalable to the point
Yeah,
where
because it's also easier to sell, right?
exactly,
If you tell me as a client that I'm gonna use, well, here's X amount of dollars, and I'm just gonna get as many leads as I possibly can for this, as opposed to onesie twosies, what's this, that, and the other, right? And then I get you probably realize that scales way easier because now you can go have one ad, right, for 50 different kind of
exactly,
clients, and now you're kind of now like, okay, well, here's your 20, here's your 20, here's your 20. And then you just kind of get better and better. What is your primary vector? Like, where are you in Facebook? Are you in like where are you
yeah.
doing these ads?
Mainly Meta for Instagram and Facebook. I've dabbled in everything, from native like Taboola to Twitter to Snapchat to TikTok to Google to YouTube to Newsbreak to pretty much everything you can think of. But I always land up coming back to Facebook and Instagram. Believe it or not, it's just it works the best. And yeah, like you said, with the systems that we use, we're able to put out that one ad and then segment it into delivering to multiple clients at the same time. So the beauty of this model is that I can launch or basically onboard a client or have a call with a client, onboard them, invoice them, and get them a lead in the same day because it's already running.
Yeah, that's magic. I know, but as a client, that's magic, right? You're like, wait, whoa, 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 whoa. I just give you money and leads come out and it happens. There's no
Yes,
setup time. It just starts happening. That's almost like a faucet. It's a dream of every business owner to kind of go down that road. And then I'm assuming
exactly.
they call and they further vet them. And out of
Exactly.
the 20, maybe 4 or 5 of them are hits, right? And out of that, maybe one's a big hit. And then they just kind of do that calculation in their head and that's really interesting. So I mean, but you're geographically tied, right? Or you can only do this in Houston for Houston lawyers. Only do this in Los Angeles for Los Angeles lawyers, right?
No, actually not. It follows a very, you know, so the product would be like a motor vehicle accident lead or a workers' comp lead, and it follows a very specific, formula or criteria. So it's, have they been at fault or were they injured or did they have treatment? And then you can kind of expand on that. But as long as those basic criteria questions are there, that is that base product. And then yes, California has its different privacy policies, but as long as those exist on the page, everything is pretty much standard. So we've been able to expand, to different law firms across the US. There's also like different marketing agencies, which they would be a bigger version of myself. And then they would basically buy as many leads as they can. They'd get them on the phone, convert them into cases, and then they would sell those cases. So it's having a mix of clients, and it has made it possible, because the law firms, depending on their intake department and how they qualify or intake the leads, I would have a decent conversion rate with one law firm and then a crappier conversion rate with another law firm, but it all depends on their intake department. So over the years, I've found out what works and what doesn't, and found a very dynamic way in which to convert those leads on a very specific formula, but in a very dynamic way, so that basically every different segment is caught. If I've got like disqualified leads, that's going to a call center. Those are getting converted in case there were mistakes or getting converted into different offers. Unsold leads are going to data partners that call those leads as well. So it's really become like quite an automated machine that once we're running the ads, we just, add zeros to the end of the campaigns, and it works pretty
And I would
smoothly.
imagine, yeah, because there was that Facebook route a while ago where they stopped kind of, Apple stopped sharing some of their, or a lot of all their data really with Facebook. I mean, I'm sure that that crushed your business for until you figured it out. How did you get around that? Or what did you do to kind of fill in those gaps?
Yeah, so that's a tough one. That hit myself and many other people in the industry, very, very hard. But it's just, constantly testing. Now we've realized that it's not rocket science to run ads. It really doesn't. We can spend quite a lot of, several thousand a day, but they've, all the systems, all the platforms are like AI based. They're very smart. So it's actually not rocket science to run ads. It's very easy to run ads. But what actually matters is just the creative. So yes, when that happened, we got hit pretty hard because all of a sudden the attribution's different, the tracking's different, the way that we're recording it, we get, all of a sudden it goes, you know, down the rabbit hole or down the drain. But what it really forced us to do is just, be very, very good with like testing different creatives. Now using AI to test creatives, using different types of actors, using images and ads and videos, and really getting, trying to get ahead of the curve around creatives. And that's basically it. People don't come onto advertising platforms to look at ads, do they? They come onto social media platforms to be entertained. So we found that don't have an ad approach, have a real social proof approach. So it must be of something of value. And like, yes, you see it all the time on billboards in the US, and, you click on one ad in the US, like a personal injury ad, and you get 100. So it's like, how can we actually add value to that? And that's adding social proof or adding a little bit of education to it. And that's basically how we got ahead of that. And even in times where, Black Friday and Cyber Monday and Christmas and all of that, and we've just been forced to change the approach to add a little bit more value rather than going for the sale per se.
Yeah, and that feels like that's always been the secret, right? In terms of physically adding value to the viewer who you're taking their time away from something that they don't necessarily want to even be there for. So if you could somehow add value to, it also sounds like you're doing a questionnaire that kind of slims down their actual intention of what they're looking for. And then I guess it sounds like once you realized it was ad type, it was the actual, the thing that you're trying to, I guess, give away first, right? To get them sucked into a questionnaire that also allows you to then go vend this out to different vendors based on their response.
Yeah,
That's
exactly. That's it. That's the beauty in it, right? It's just the qualification survey, and you can get really, really advanced in that, in the way that it can be completely dynamic in terms of, what we pass in the URL parameters from the ads. So having one parameter in there to say like, hey, this ad type is that, and it will dynamically change the entire survey. So all of a sudden, it goes from that headline to that headline just based on the URL parameters. So, really getting quite involved and advanced and technical in this space has allowed me to succeed just by really becoming a master of my craft is something that I enjoy. Did I ever envision that this is the niche that I'd be focused on? No. But what it's allowed me to do is become very, very creative and technical in a space that I really do enjoy, and it's really become something that I'm passionate about because I can get so creative in a very technical way, and I think that's what is needed to become successful. You have to enjoy it. It can't feel like work.
and it allows you to get you a view of Table Mountain behind you.
Exactly. Exactly. That is real. That is not a backdrop. That is real.
It affords you Table Mountain views, which is real money, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I probably asked this question about a billion times, like on these type of interviews, and how did you get here? And I'd say maybe half the time they're just like, I don't even know. I just kind of like, I did this, and I was just receptive to what's out there, receptive to learning, and receptive to knowing that I don't know anything, and that anything's a possibility. And it sounds like that was part of your journey.
Absolutely. I could never have imagined, landing up here or, being in the space that I'm in or in the position I'm in or earning as much as I have. I think the biggest thing that I struggled with when I started, because as I said, I studied as an architect and actually went back to study architecture when I was 25. So I only finished when I was 28, and then once I worked in it for a year or two, I was like, this is not what I want to do. I hated the idea of being fixed in one place and, not being able to travel. And, that was, of course, quite difficult. But I think the biggest thing for me is, to try well, the biggest struggle I had back then was to combat or overcome what we call in the marketing industry, that shiny object syndrome. Like, oh, look at that. Oh, look at that. Oh, look at that. There's YouTube ads or affiliate marketing. I must have spent thousands of dollars on different types of courses that I didn't finish, of course. But, I tried to do so many different things because I think the biggest issues that we see in the space, or I mean, in today in general, is like, oh, make money in 45 days or make money in 30 days or make money in 6 months. And that, is what I hoped for, but that was not the case, so I think the one thing that led me to move away from architecture was actually, Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week.
Me too. I read it on my when I went on my honeymoon. I was in Crete, Greece, and I read through it. And I'm like, I'm gonna make a change, and it was probably
Exactly.
4 years later that I finally figured a way out. But it gave me I don't know what it gave me. It just gave me the fire to know that there was a bigger world out there. And by the way, my wife's an architect, and she tells
Okay.
people just go to med school. It's easier.
Exactly. Exactly. I agree. I agree. It is not. It creates maybe 10% of the career is creative, but it's really not. So it wasn't what I hoped for. But what it did do is it really changed the way that I thought. It gave me that technical, creative problem solving ability, which has, of course, absolutely helped me in what I do today. But, it so that was an absolute blessing. But it really, what was important was that I focused on one thing, and that was the biggest thing for me. It was reading Tim Ferriss's book. I don't even think I finished it because I was so excited. But the one thing he did say was, go and write down on a piece of paper, email it to yourself, or set a notification for a year's time. And I kind of wrote these things that wrote down what I wanted to come true. But and I read it a years later, and they didn't come true, and I was quite disappointed. But, because we're living in a world of instant gratification, and that was kind of disappointing. But guess what? Not 2 years later, not 3 years later, like you said, 4 years later, that came true. And by the fifth year, times 100. I couldn't even imagine or begin to fathom what was in store for me. The most important part was actually just, overcoming that shiny object syndrome. I literally went from lead gen to that, to affiliate marketing, to YouTube ads, to that. Yes, it benefited me in the end because I've got a very strong tool set behind me. I do most things in my business, which is a blessing and a curse. But it really helped me, expand and do things slightly differently. But it's only once I started focusing on that one thing and becoming an expert at it did things start taking off. So I think the message out there to anyone is, that's struggling or in that place is, don't give up 5 minutes before the miracle happens. Like I was ready to give up several times, but I didn't. I just kept going and pushing, and burnouts and breakdowns, and just kept pushing. And eventually, once I got to the place where I really was an expert in it, or really, really good at it, that's when the game started to change.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so because it's so disheartening sometimes, the thing whatever you chose, you're like, "Am I on the right path? Am I looking at the right thing? Am I getting really good at something that matters? Is it gonna pay?" And all those kind of things are dragging you down, and now there's maybe family responsibilities, and all these other responsibilities are just constantly kind of pecking away, at that focus, and it's a little bit tough, to say the least. But with all that said, I mean, you know, what would you have done differently? I mean, if you could go back and say, okay, Nick, don't do that, do this, what would it be?
That is a very good question. And I think the one thing that comes to mind is that when I said now is both a blessing and a curse, is that whilst, having a lot of skills has definitely benefited me and it's really allowed me to do things differently, because I can be both creative and I can do the ads and do the creatives and the back end and the coding and the survey and everything, which I enjoy the most. I like being able to do everything, but if I had to do it differently, it would be that. That it took me about 2 years because it blew up so quickly. I was doing everything myself and I did, a large amount of revenue pretty much on my own. But then by that stage, I was just too busy to start hiring, to start doing SOPs, to start outsourcing. So the one thing that I would do differently is basically have a framework set out and say, okay, this is what I'm good at, this is what I enjoy doing. And before I get too big or scale up, whatever, I'm going to get people to help me to do this, this, and this. And that was why I said, my blessing and my curse, because I became good at pretty much everything that I needed to do. But then to try and help or to hire people to get me to do it, it became really difficult for me to firstly hand over control and secondly be like patient enough for them to allow, the people that I've employed to do their work. Because for me, I can go and fix it in 5 minutes. But then I had to learn to say, okay, no, actually, you know, do this, this, and this, and this. And that was probably my biggest challenge, because I got really good at it and I can do it all myself, but that is not scalable and that's not sustainable. So it's about having the systems in place for when it starts to blow up. And, when you become a master of the craft, it's inevitable that's going to happen. You can make a lot of money doing anything. If you say you want to make $1 million out of walking dogs, you can, but you're not going to walk all those dogs yourself. You're going to hire people and you're going to have an app. But, it's having those systems in place that are ready for when it blows up. And that's one thing I didn't do. I did it all myself. It blew up, and I actually I got to the point where I had to pause clients and pause everything because I'd burnt out and I couldn't keep up. And I had to go back and put systems in place and then start building back up again. So that's the one thing I'd do differently.
Yeah, because your business goes like you can lose a lot of money very quickly in ads, especially Facebook ads. You are a single click away from losing $5,000 a day and getting not a single
Yep.
lead. And it's one of those things that if now you're training someone else, right? Now someone else is now burning your money, right? And a lot of your magic, I think, comes from the intuitiveness of going, this smells wrong. It's 11
Exactly.
o'clock. It's a Tuesday. It's not, and we're not
Exactly.
on some holiday, in America right now. What the hell is going on? We should have got at least 11. And it's that intuition that's scary to systematize, right? Because
Exactly.
now you hand the keys over to your first employee. And unless
Exactly.
you've got it figured out, you're like, well, there's 15 grand up the rope, right? That I just burned
Exactly.
because they didn't smell the problem earlier.
And it's funny that you say that, and you mentioned the figure of $5,000. I was trying to work with a developer that I needed help with. He got a little bit too clever. Oh, he's going to put this and this and this in place. I'm running quite high budgets, and exactly by like 10, 11 a.m., $5,000 was spent to a dead end. He changed something on the name servers. So running $5,000 worth of ads by 10, 11 in the morning, literally to a dead end, blank.
Yep, to a 404 not found page because it
404,
wasn't
nothing.
the caching server was wrong or whatever
Exactly.
problems you were solving that day. It's scary as hell. And he doesn't no, while that person cared, he wouldn't have known there was an issue because he hadn't done this
Exactly.
1,000 times like you, and that is the
Exactly.
control problem.
And
Now,
that
I
is the
now,
control.
now I also I've always I imagine there's a arms race going on right now with AI. I would imagine there is probably some pretty smart people working on your problem space that may be snipping at your heels a little bit because now with the right AI and the right orchestration software, you can kind of do some stuff, right? Have you experienced that or are you kind of going through that as well?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So you either work with it or you work against it, and I don't think I've really struggled with, AI sort of be causing an issue for me, I think the biggest issue for me would be the competition in the space. The more people that are trying to generate leads in the legal space, the more difficult it gets, the more expensive it gets. But AI has really allowed me to, basically, I'm like a developer myself, but I can't really code. I just use AI. But AI it's pretty crazy at how quickly you can do things now. And I think I haven't noticed it causing an interference for me yet, but rather than it's becoming a solution. So many different AI tools out there that can just halve the time of doing anything, or cut it in, fraction of the time. So that's the big thing.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine I could hook up to the Facebook ad library, right? The API itself, and I could roll through ads trying to make, but you don't necessarily know what worked and what didn't work. I don't think from the ad library, but you could at very minimum you could train something, maybe a LoRa model or whatever, to kind of go figure it out. And I feel like we're probably that we're near the like the edge of something big happening, and I maybe
Oh,
catastrophic for your business, my business, everybody's business. We sniff it, we smell it. It's probably coming, right? We just haven't figured out how they're gonna kind of make it happen or whatever.
yeah. Yeah, I mean that's a good point. I mean, I think there's many different things that you can do, and you mentioned the API, which gets me excited because when you're able to work with APIs and just even on a simple level, it's pretty cool. Like I'm able to take a bunch of clients, all their leads that they get in a specific day, they send to me. I automate it, put it in like a spreadsheet, created a little automation that uploads it to my audiences. All of a sudden, on a daily basis, all those leads that are basically dead or duplicates are getting excluded from the audiences on autopilot. So with technology and AI, we've been able to do some pretty smart things about, especially around that. Working with the AI, I mean, work with the API, using AI to segment the data, to look it up, to clean it up, to research it. So I haven't. I mean, I guess I might be noticing stuff that's causing interference with me, but I've been more focused on around using AI to benefit me rather, that I haven't really noticed it become an issue rather than even in a very competitive space. I've noticed I've been able to scale up even more by working less and using AI to work more.
Yeah, I've been using something called N8N, which is this kind of orchestration type software, and it's really blowing my mind in that things that would have taken me. I'm a software developer by trade,
Okay.
and I mean, and typically it would have taken me a month to do that. I had this one little project I was going to go do, right? And what it is I wanted to go, I don't know, I wanted to go harness up this LoRa technology for something called Flex LoRa model, which is
Well,
basically take someone's headshots, go train the model, and then go build new headshots based on that
well,
model, right? I did it in 4 hours. I did the
yeah.
whole thing. It had a login, it had an administrative section.
Wow.
It was bonkers. That probably would have taken me a month before.
Oh, easily, easily. No, it's frightening what you can do, and I think for people listening is, it actually surprises me when I've even got some friends. They're like, "Oh, I don't really use ChatGPT." I'm like, "What rock do we
Yeah,
live on?"
yeah.
Use it, embrace it, and don't just use it to type emails. Like the things that it can do is pretty crazy. It can automate it. I haven't really played with like the agent mode, but there's so much that you can do with it that it can just automate everything that you need it to do or that you'd like that's possible of automating. And I've really enjoyed what it can do, but at the same sense, it is kind of frightening. But rather use it to the advantage because yes, we have no idea what's going to happen, but I like the exciting part around it, like being able to innovate way quicker with it is to me, it's I don't even think about the negatives because I'm focused on the positives about what I can do with it.
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought, or I've always theorized that entrepreneurship is inefficiencies in the market, and we're simply going in and filling those inefficiencies. And I feel like
Exactly.
this this AI-ish, right? Whatever it really is going to make those efficiencies scarcer and scarcer, but it's going to open up entirely new inefficiencies that no one even thought of. And I don't know, it's going to be a very interesting next 1 to 5 years, because you realize we're only 2 or 3 years into this, ChatGPT. We're really only 2 or 3 years into this. Like, doesn't it feel like it's been 10 years? It feels like we're going like 10 years at a time. It's just going so fast.
It's
It is
crazy. Like,
bonkers.
to think that, it was just released to the world in November 2022, and, it was quite basic then. And, now I'm still noticing it making stupid mistakes, but, the rates in which it's increasing and going up, and what do they say? It's still in its amoeba phase. Like, it's still in an infant phase, which is scary, because it's now a super intelligence, but it's still at its infancy. So yeah, it's exciting and scary at the same time. But
We'll leave it there. Thank you very much for doing this. You're extraordinary. I dig your energy. I kind of dig. You're like, I don't really know how I got here. I just went there. Then I went here. I went over there, and you just kind of stuck with it. And thanks for being Nick.